EA's had it pretty rough throughout the month of November with all the controversy surrounding Star Wars Battlefront 2, and deservedly so. It was bad enough for them that towards the end of November, $3.1 billion in EA stock value had been wiped out, which isn't a mortal wound by any means, but it's no insignificant value either. EA stocks dipped even further throughout the early days of December. You may recall that on December 4th, EA announced changes that they'd be making to multiplayer rewards, namely in the form of rewarding more credits after a match. Apparently, this didn't sit well with investors, as it meant that when microtransactions are reintroduced, there may be less revenue potential through long-term recurrent monetization. By December 4th, EA stocks took another nosedive, and by that point, Star Wars Battlefront 2 had cost the company closer to $6 billion in stock value. Now, if you look at the latest data, you can see that stocks are on the rise again, so EA is gaining some momentum back, but the amount of financial damage done was still substantial. And this is all without considering the fact that according to the MPD, Battlefront 2 sold less than 1 million physical units throughout its launch month, pushing only 20% of Call of Duty World War II's physical sales and only 40% of what Battlefront 1 achieved during its launch month back in 2015. For the cherry on top, because of Disney's displeasure with the way EA handled the situation, microtransactions had to be turned off temporarily during the pivotal launch period, which is probably where EA lost the most money. So, with all this in mind, just how bad has it all been for EA? Well, seemingly bad enough that according to this article by CNBC, analysts had to cut EA profit estimates after the uproar against Battlefront 2 led the game's sales to plummet. Bank of America Merrill Lynch analyst Justin Post wrote the following excerpt in a note to clients titled, "Lowering Estimates for Battlefront 2, Stock Weakness Sets for a Better 2018. EA has had a challenging C4Q, beginning with a shutdown of Visceral Games and now Battlefront 2 controversy. As controversy subsides post-holidays, we expect investor interest to pick up ahead of a stronger fiscal year 19 title slate, renewed digital optimism, and operating leverage potential. Battlefront 2 microtransactions relaunch and FIFA World Cup content launch are key 1H events." The article then continued with, Post maintained his buy rating and reduced his price target to $130 from $137 for Electronic Arts shares, representing a 23.5% upside to Friday's close. The analyst noted how EA shares have materially underperformed since the end of September, falling 11% versus the S&P 500's 5% return. He said November US physical game unit sales of Star Wars Battlefront 2 declined 52% versus 2015 Star Wars Battlefront in its first month, according to MPD sell-through data. For the record, that 52% decline figure is based on reports that Battlefront 1 sold 1.8 million physical copies during its 2015 launch month, but if you include bundle sales, that number is actually closer to 2.1 million copies. So in reality, Battlefront 2's decline versus Battlefront 1 is closer to 60%. What's the bottom line to all this? Well, according to the Merrill Lynch analyst, he predicts that EA will miss its 14 million unit sales target by a significant 2.5 million. However, he also optimistically predicts that the return of microtransactions sometime next year is highly likely, despite EA CFO Blake Jorgensen having raised the possibility that microtransactions may not return to Battlefront 2 in a statement that he gave during the NASCAD investor conference on December 5th. The way the analyst put it was, quote, Battlefront 2 microtransactions likely to return next year. Perhaps the biggest stock negative from the Battlefront 2 microtransactions issues is the potential negative impact on fiscal year 2019 microtransactions revenues. That said, even with 12 million in total units sold and an average of $10 of microtransactions per game sold, Battlefront 2 could still do over 100 million in microtransactions. As much as I hate reading that last bit, it is is true that if EA manages to sell 12 million copies of Battlefront 2, and assuming that they will reactivate microtransactions early 2018, they will still stand to make a lot of money from the title despite the setbacks. They certainly won't be making as much money as they originally intended to, but they'll still make a significant amount. To close off his notes to clients, the analyst suggested 4 possible ways EA could reintroduce microtransactions into Battlefront 2, keeping them cosmetic only, allowing players to make direct purchases of new hero characters, introducing purchasable collectibles, or charging for single-player downloadable content. We at least know that the last one isn't likely to happen, as EA made a commitment to releasing all DLCs and additional content at no extra cost. I would say that EA's safest move would be to revamp the progression system so that they no longer revolve around microtransactions and loot boxes, and make in-game purchases entirely for cosmetic items. That's the only way I feel EA can remotely begin to salvage this without instigating another mass protest. Ideally, I'd like microtransactions to be gone completely, or for EA to make Battlefront 2 free to play if they intend to reintroduce microtransactions. But this is EA we're talking about. Reasonable solutions simply aren't in their repertoire. So long story short, according to analyst Justin Post, EA took some financial blows this year, and as a result, profit estimates had to be lowered for investors. But Post believes that EA can still manage to sell 12 million Battlefront 2 copies, reintroduce microtransactions, and do well throughout fiscal year 2019. He views everything that's happened as nothing more than a minor setback, essentially. Now, it's important to keep in mind that at the end of the day, these analysts have the investors' best interest in mind, not the consumers. It's their job to ease their worries, give them a positive outlook, and present them a best-case scenario. Just to show you how little fucks analysts give about consumers, one analyst back in November 20th, 2017 went as far as to say that gamers are overreacting to EA's Star Wars controversy and proposed that publishers should actually be raising prices for their games. Fuck that guy, by the way. Sure, these analysts have insider information and mathematical know-how, but they are so out of touch with the consumers that they often tend to lose the forest for the trees. They keep undervaluing and underestimating the consumer's capacity to instigate change because they're so focused on the numbers and the potential profits. But one of these days, this blind spot is going to come back to bite them in the ass hard. Case in point, analysts certainly never saw the unprecedented backlash against Battlefront 2 coming, and with their current attitude, there's a lot that they won't see coming next year. Justin Post himself also seems confident in asserting that the loot box controversy will subside by the end of this year, but if you ask me, the controversy is only getting started. You've got government officials like Hawaii State Legislator Chris Lee, who are pushing hard for a bill to restrict video games featuring loot boxes for minors under the age of 21. Chris Lee's hope is that by passing this bill in just a couple states, it will take away enough market share away from publishers and make the implementation of predatory features enough of a financial liability that they'll have to think twice before considering exploiting players. Another great victory for consumers is that thanks to how widespread the Battlefront 2 fiasco was, the stigmatization of loot boxes has also come a long way, and now more people than ever before are aware of their abhorrent nature. Sure, it may take a while before we fully push back greedy game publishers, but we have made significant headway in November 2017 alone, and I believe that if these publishers don't back off soon, then there will come a day of reckoning for them. There will come a time when companies like EA, who have foolishly put all their eggs in the microtransactions and loot box basket, will have to jump through substantial regulatory hoops that will make their Achilles heel of a business model impractical, and when that happens, when their Achilles heel gets torn to pieces, investors will feel the full brunt of EA's titanic fall. That's the hope, at least, and the only way we can make that happen is if we prove Justin Post's prediction that the controversy will subside by the end of the year wrong by keeping the flames of the loot box conversation ablaze throughout the next year and beyond. Either we run this marathon all the way through to the finish line, or we let publishers publishers win, and they get to continue to ruin potentially great games and prey on players for the foreseeable future. With that, I would like to end this news update. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you found this video informative, and if you enjoy my content, consider supporting me on Patreon to help this channel stay independent and self-sustained. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out!